Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, your soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Hi, I'm back with another episode in this Simple Keys to Soul Growth. And I was thinking about this whole notion about embodying goodness, which I talked about last month. And in this situation of how do we do that, we have to create space. In order to embody goodness, along with the things I talked about last month, is also creating space. And part of that creating space is looking at this next key, which is approaching avoidance. Needing to look at the things that we avoid, because they may stack up like in our basement or in an attic, these boxes of stuff, old stuff. Things that we haven't looked at for a good period of time, or things that bring back memories. And it may be happy memories, and it may be kind of not so great memories, sad memories, or disappointing memories, or regretful memories, or whatever it may be. But we need to be able to take an awareness of, are there things that we are avoiding that we need to actually look at head on and make some choices about, because it does tie into this whole notion of soul growth, soul progress. When I talk about approach avoidance, and I'm going to talk about avoidance, and when I talk about approaching avoidance, you can think about it from the standpoint of resistance. Avoidance usually occurs because we are resistant in some ways to look at something or want to delve into a particular topic because of certain emotions and feelings that come up for us, which I'll be talking about in terms of what are these avoiding behaviors that we may need to look at more intentionally and consciously and determine what we want to have happen in our worlds. But first of all is, when you think about this whole piece of resistance, I think about it like a bird. You know, when an eagle flies, it kind of, it has a great span, but it also has to navigate resistance. It doesn't know the current or the wind. It doesn't know how it's going to be intense or breezy, as they say. And when it's breezy, we can navigate pretty well as that eagle flying. But when there is resistance, it reduces the capacity of that eagle to fly faster unless it makes some adjustments. And that's what you think about with the soul. Is there resistance through avoiding certain things? Do we need to look at what the resistance that's being created through the avoidance and what impact it has on the soul? Everything, we just don't think about it. Everything has an impact on the soul. The good, the bad, and the indifferent. Everything is vibration, and it has an impact. And I invite you to think about that, because when we start to look at energetic stuff that goes on in our worlds, in terms of the people we meet, in terms of the situations that happen to us, in terms of the behaviors that we engage in, or in terms of the thoughts that we have, or the feelings and reactions that we have, it all is coming, swirling around, having an impact upon the soul, either to create clarity or create confusion. Clarity or confusion it can create. And for the soul, certainly we would want greater clarity to see what the next steps, the next things that we need to do. but it's in creating this confusion. Then confusion is like a haze. It's like a fog that's created, and it's hard to see through until that fog or that haze lifts, and we can see greater things of what we need to do. But we can also sometimes, with resistance, that was talked about earlier, we can also have this fog be ever present with us. And that's not in alignment with the soul's direction and what we need to do. But getting back into this whole notion of avoiding, there are 6 types of avoiding types behaviors that impact the soul. And I thought it would be good to think about these things and think about where you're at on the continuum in terms of mild, moderate, or severe in these. And so we're going to go down that road. But one of the things with this avoiding, it sometimes creates a challenge. And we think it's fine to avoid because we no longer feel that discomfort. We no longer feel that anxiety or angst. Is no longer feeling fearful or that the situation is dangerous and threatening. And certainly if something is going to be bodily harm to you or it's going to be emotionally harming to you, you do need to look at that. And you do need to step out of the way and take the appropriate course of action or develop the appropriate mechanisms to manage those types of situations. But overall, I'm talking about this resistance or this avoidance that we engage in that is not life-threatening, that is not going to harm us in a significant way. But instead, it's these little things that we may be avoiding that get in the way of the soul's progress, the soul's ability to take flight, to fly in the way that it needs to gain the experiences that are important to the soul and the soul's evolution. And also, as another caveat, is that there are certain traumas that people have, getting back to that life-threatening type of situation. There are certain traumas that people have that are painful, hurtful, that create a lot of angst. And those things, when they do happen, there's compassion, there's an awareness that it takes time for the healing process to take place. And certainly there is a need to gain the help and guidance that will be helpful to you. And that might be seeing a therapist or a psychotherapist, or it may be talking with professionals that can support you and help you through that process. So that's kind of on the other end of the spectrum. And I'm talking about more the mild, moderate levels of the spectrum that impacts the soul just as well as that trauma does as well. And it needs to be dealt with and handled and managed in a compassionate way. But also these milder and moderate types of situations can also have an impact upon the soul that is just as important to look at. If there's anything else about this avoiding aspect, it probably would be, when I talk about avoiding, getting more specific about that, it is something that we don't like, that we are fearful about, that we feel maybe shameful or anxious or annoyed or uncomfortable, maybe mild or moderate levels, that are levels in which I'm talking about this avoiding. These are all types of awkward feelings that we do have, be it fearful or shameful or anxious or annoyed. All those are feelings that we don't like and therefore we wish to avoid. And when we're feeling bad about those feelings, anything we feel bad about or we don't like, we tend to just push away or not handle. I guess more on the mild or the moderate level, positive aspect of avoiding. You can think about, there's certain foods, for example, that we know is not good for us, that we're trying to lose weight, and so we don't have it in our house. So that's a fun way. So I guess what I'm getting at is avoiding is not necessarily bad. It has its place. But when it moves into the realm of having to look at some dicey emotions that we're experiencing or identifying emotions that may cloud the soul's ability to make progress, then that's what I'm making mention of. So for example, it's okay if you decide to avoid getting into a conversation with past individuals that you know that are going to gossip about things. And you're not wanting to really go down that road of gossiping because you know it's not in an agreement or an alignment with your soul and with your morals and your values and the things that you're trying to move forward in your life. So you decide to avoid those types of individuals. That makes sense. That makes sense to want to be able to do that. I'm just going back and forth with trying to say there's times in which avoidance behavior is not something that is terrible to do. It's more intentional. You know why you're doing it, and that's fine. But there are some behaviors that we may engage in our thinking and our feeling and how we show up, where avoidance is not helpful in moving the soul forward in the soul evolution. One of those, for example, is fear. And when there's fear about something and it's coming up in us and we have a visceral feeling about the fear, we need to stop and need to look at it. Because that fear may be fear of failure, it may be being embarrassed by someone or something that was said, or being judged or feeling rejected. We avoid those feelings, but we have to look at that and just say, just because a person doesn't say something that I like, do I need to avoid them? And if I'm avoiding, what impact does the fear have on my soul? Being fearful all the time, does that shut me down? Does it not allow me to be in listening grace to how I need to handle the fear as opposed to avoid it? Because sometimes we do need to speak up. Sometimes we need to say, that's not right. What you're saying is not of who I am. And leave it at that. But you're taking the courage to be able to make a comment when it's appropriate and respectful, certainly. So, for example, is sometimes a lot of people avoid public speaking. It's number one of the things that we may tend to avoid. But how can public speaking be helpful to you? In a situation where you're at work and you're the only person that has expertise in the area, and your knowledge base is so much vitally important to the movement of the project, and people need to hear that expertise, information that you have to share. And so we may say, no, I'm too fearful, so I'm not going to do it. Or you could say, with the grace of God in my soul and mind, how may I do this? How may I make this? I may not do an hour conversation about it, but how may I make it more manageable for me? It may be 30 minutes that you share your knowledge. And then it's also you practice. You practice in front of a mirror, or you practice with other individuals, and you let them know, this is kind of my fear factor here. And, so can you help me out? As opposed to just removing yourself entirely from the situation that could add value of your voice to the project at work that was being done. So this is where I'm saying we need to challenge ourselves, and we need to be able to say, why am I fearful? Just because this is something new for me to do doesn't mean it's not something that my soul needs help with to evolve and grow, to have the courage. And the quality that may be developing is courage the soul needs. Now the next one, the second one, is anxiety. Many times we don't do things because we feel anxious about it, or angst about it, or we're feeling that particular activating situation or person is making us too fluttered and too feeling that we may be uncertain in terms of what we need to do, or feeling out of control, or feeling as if we're going to be harmed in some way. But we need to recheck that. We need to look at the angst of the situation, because it may be just new to us and making us anxious. Or it may be something that we need to confront and deal with. Why am I being so anxious about this situation? It's very benign that's being requested of me. And just because it's new doesn't mean I don't have the wherewithal to do it if you're embedded in the awareness of Christ, of God, of Atman, of my soul, that will help to guide me, strengthen me, and what I need to do. So it's an entirely different perspective that you're taking when you're walking a spiritual path. So we talked about fear. We talked about anxiety. And the next one I want to talk about is distracting ourselves by screens. Yes, distracting ourselves by screens. And that can be scrolling on the social media, whatever platform that you want to choose, binge watching TV, excessive gaming that can happen. What happens that we're doing this? Is there something uncomfortable that we're using that time and not using the time necessarily wisely to be able to be more in tune with how do I continue to grow my soul? How do I continue to look at of these situations I'm looking at by my being on the screens? What prayers or calls need to be made in helping of other individuals? We just had this big horrific situation occur in North Carolina and Florida. Well, there's a lot of prayers that could be of help, to those who are have no homes, and have lost family members, who are trying to recoup from the experiences that they've gone through. And I do wholeheartedly believe in the power of prayer. Prayer for their loved ones, prayer for those who are passed on, prayers to give them the resources that they will come in a timely manner to support and help them. Oh, that's helpful. And so we're now taking that information that we've been scrolling on the screens with and not using that to distract ourselves, but using it to gather information of how we may be able to be of service, what the things we saw. And sometimes we just can make a short prayer and say, Lord God Almighty, or the name of Christ, take command of the situation concerning blah, blah, blah. And you know what? The angels do, because the call compels the answer. We are co-creators. You've heard me talk about this before. We're co-creators on this planet. And so if we're co-creators, then we can make the call, we can ask for prayers, and we can make fiats that can be of help to other individuals as a co-creator with God. And our soul is delighted when that's happening, because a soul's quest and direction is always finding little ways, great ways to reunite with the Christ, being Christ-like, reuniting with God, being God-like in our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. So if you're going to get distracted, use the distraction on purpose to look at things that could be of value, could be of help to other individuals. But just to be scrolling, what are we avoiding? What is it that we need to do? Is this a habit we've gotten into? And is this a habit that needs to be broken? So the fourth is about or around suppressing emotions instead of processing them. We're suppressed, something has happened to us, we don't like it, we feel awkward or uncomfortable about it, and so we're trying to avoid that particular emotion of anger or disappointment or hurt or pain, and we're trying to avoid that. So that's what I'm talking about when I say suppression of emotion. And what we need to be able to do is say, what's up? Why am I suppressing this feeling? And first of all, what is this feeling that, doesn't feel so great to me? And maybe we need to reframe it and look at it from a different vantage point. Instead of pushing it down out of the conscious awareness, that's what suppression does. So we know there's something up, but we're putting it out of our conscious awareness. And when we do this, we hope that the thoughts and the emotions will no longer affect us in any way. But guess what? It's just like it's in the basement. It's still there within us, or in the attic. It's still there. Or it's in our kitchen, or in our living room. It's still there. And so we need to be able to say, okay, this is energy. What is this energy that I'm trying to suppress? And therefore, what is it that I need to do to look at it? Because what you're ultimately wanting to do to move to that point of clarity for the soul is you're trying to see, what is the truth here? What is this emotion? What is the truth about this emotion? And usually emotions are energy in motion. They will come and they will go. They may linger, but they will eventually go. They will move on. But when we suppress our emotions, they actually just suppress into the subconscious. And it doesn't mean they're not operating in the subconscious part of our minds, which is that basement that I'm talking about, or any other place within our house, which is our inner being. When we're able to look at the emotion that we're suppressing, then we're moving it in the right direction to say, okay, how is this impacting my soul? If I get angry, maybe I need to look at what are the activating things that are going on, the persons, the situations that are creating my anger, and let me figure out a way to manage it and handle it. Or if I'm getting more depressed about something, what do I need to do? What do I need to look at? Do I need help from a physician? Do I need help from a mental health practitioner? Do I need help from a coach? What can I do to move myself in a different direction that moves me towards clarity and not into confusion? So it does require for us to take a minute and reflect, think about, and know that there may be another approach or direction that we can move in. Be in listening grace to our soul, because our soul is always trying to help us. And it just has too much static. It has too much confusion, too much haze that's getting in the way. So when we slow down and we ask for guidance, then usually through a book, through a person, through a situation, it brings something to our attention that we can do a little bit different to move forward. Now, the next thing I want to talk about on this, of the 5 of the 6 areas of avoiding, is procrastination. Procrastination, actually, it can be with a project or a task that needs to get done. And this could be due to, in terms of the procrastination, to the task being unpleasant. You really don't want to do it. You're not in the mood of doing it. You have a sense of anxiety or fear about having to do it and diving into it. You may have a quality that happens for you of perfectionism, or are feeling overwhelmed with the task at hand because it seems like there's too many moving pieces to it. And that might be underneath even that procrastination that we have, may be related to qualities of having low confidence or low self-esteem, or we're feeling that we don't understand, we don't know what type of structure. We don't know what type of structure that's going to help us to pull this together, that is being asked for us to do. And underneath that, maybe we just don't have the motivation to complete the unpleasant task. We're just not motivated, so we procrastinate. And then when the 11th hour comes, we rush to try to get it all done. But then we're finding it, we're kind of between a rock and a hard place, because we rush to get it done and we're not satisfied with what we got done. But at the same time, we got something done based upon the time crunch that we were under. So be aware of, how does procrastination impact my soul? And if I procrastinate, be aware of the fact that the soul does have timetables by which it needs to get things done. Just as our life is on a timetable, or a timer, if you want to look at it that way, a beginning, a middle, and an end to our life journey that we go through. So why develop the habit of procrastination when we know that our soul says it puts me in a straitjacket? It doesn't allow me to continue to advance in a systematic and healthy way. And the next item that I want to talk about relates to kind of the 6 of these avoiding behaviors, which there are many, many more types of avoiding behaviors, and you can probably list out some others as well and let me know of them. But I wanted to just begin the process of talking about this, is staying overly busy. That's a 6. Staying overly busy to avoid dealing with emotions or issues that come up. So we just keep busy. We keep on doing things. We keep on overloading ourselves by saying yes to things that we may not really want to do, but you know what? I can do. There's a lot of things we can do, but we also want to make sure are the things that we're doing are filled with things that we want to do and have space and time so that the soul can continue to guide and direct and help you. Because if we're staying overly busy, it means our mind is always being occupied. Our feelings are always revolving around something. And it doesn't give the space or the opportunity for the soul to give you guidance. The soul needs space. It needs silence. It needs the ability of harmony and peace, which I've talked about before, for it to give to you inspiration, to give to you guidance. What may be helpful for you to do in the particular situation that you find yourself in, or the particular person or interpersonal relationship you're involved with, or in the work project or assignment that you need to get done. One of the things you need to ask yourself when you're staying overly busy to avoid dealing with emotions or issues is this question around, is it making things better or making them worse? By being overly busy, what's being the betterment and what's going on with making things maybe worse, making you feel more frazzled or making you feel more anxious or annoyed about having to do something because we didn't put up the barrier of being able to say, no, not now. I don't need to do this. But all of this, all of these six that I'm talking about, the fear, anxiety, or in situations about distracting oneself, or suppressing emotions, or procrastinating, or staying overly busy, what do they have in common? Besides you. They have you in common, yes. But they all have in common this emotional state of avoidance. This emotional state of being aware of the fact that when we be like that eagle that is flying and is having some resistance, and that resistance is a form of avoidance of things, and it has to land for a while in order for the wind or the currents to be in a different manner and not be a hurricane or a tornado or a bad storm. That when it lands, it's landing on purpose instead of I'm trying to avoid the storm. No, it's not wise to land. So you're using it in a purposeful way to land, reflect, rethink as it relates to the soul level. What do I need to do here to make my life better and for the life of those around me? So something to think about with that, because sometimes these types of six avoidings that I'm talking about, it doesn't allow that eagle to fly. And instead, it ends up breaking up the flight pattern through these storms that we may have, these six behaviors that we may engage in. Part of the quality of the soul is it ties in to the Christic nature. And the Christic nature is wise. It knows when do we need to land, appropriately so, and when do we need to continue to fly, meet the resistance, and change our formation of how we're flying. It's like the eagle that knows that it needs to tilt its wings in a different way in order to maneuver through the currents that is occurring. Or it needs to dive out of that current and come back up higher. So there's maybe different patterns that we need to engage in that the soul knows and will help us and guide us through the situation or the terrain or the journey that you're on as you're living your life. One last thing when we're talking about the soul, because what I was just giving you kind of a recognition around is the approach. How do you approach the situations? That's what the soul wants to know, is how are you approaching these particular situations? Which approach, if you think about it, the word approach, is really getting nearer to something or closer to something or changing your style of how you're doing something. And that's what the soul wants, the flexibility around, that you can be able to change up when you need to and not allow these 6 avoiding behaviors to be the thing that gets in your way to allow you to continue to evolve and grow and advance and manage emotions and tolerate uncomfortable emotions, learning how to navigate that. And that's where, if you need some assistance or support in that through a coach or a counselor or a practitioner of any kind, that's good. Take that path. Or it's by reading something or something and getting involved in your spiritual books and tapes and CDs and streaming, that allows you to gain a better understanding of what these emotions are and how do I gain mastery around them. That's really helpful as well. So one of the things that becomes important to the soul evolution and soul progress, it wants you to develop the skill set. It wants a skill set, and not by avoiding, you end up not developing any type of a skill set because you've isolated yourself. You're not involved. You're not actively engaged in the living of life. And when we're actively engaged in the living of life, it means we have to learn the skills and we have to be able to learn to navigate. And we have to be able to know if you're doing this with the soul in mind, I do have a soul. I do have a higher path that I'm walking. And I can tap in to the wisdom of my soul, the wisdom of my heart, the wisdom of the Christ that exists within me, and the God, the Atman, the I Am presence. I can do all these things. I do have resources that are available to me. Let me actively use them and integrate them into my daily life and the things I want to get done, be it as a parent, be it as a colleague, be it as an aunt or uncle, be it as a wife or a husband. How do I integrate behavior, skills, resources that are soul-centered, spiritually centered, that guides me on a higher path, that connects me to something greater than myself? Something to think about. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.